Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. The Interlull is over. All the Interlulls are over, actually. That's it for Interlulls for the 2024-25 season. There's been some interesting bits and pieces going on with some Arsenal players during this international break, so we're going to talk about that. We're also going to take a couple of questions about the upcoming games against Real Madrid, the impending return of Bukayo Saka, and lots more besides. And we might as well just crack on with the show. With me today to have the chats, it's a pleasure to welcome back Charles Watts. Good morning, Charles.
Hello, Andrew. Good to be back. How are you, mate?
I'm good, thank you very much. Interlull treating you okay, I hope?
Yeah, not too bad, as we were just talking about. Bit of golf, bit of downtime. It feels harsh having to wait till Tuesday night, though. You know, interlulls are bad enough at the best of times, but you kind of want to be back for the weekend. To have to wait until the Tuesday, it's like, oh, come on, do us a favour.
I know, but, we could, stayed in the FA Cup. That might have helped.
That might have helped.
Might have been a bit of a help, but look, we can't change that now. We do have some stuff to talk about, but I think before we get into that, we really do have to reference last night and Arsenal women beating Real Madrid 3-0. For those who want more in-depth analysis of that game, Tim and Jamie have done an Arsenal Women Arsecast, which is out now. You'll find that in all the usual places, and they'll get into the real nuts and bolts of that. But after what was a disappointing game last week, the playing field was levelled, if you like, by the fact that there was a playing field worth playing on at the Emirates last night. A really, really impressive performance from Arsenal. I think absolutely dominant, thoroughly deserved the win. And to stage a comeback, I guess, from 2-0 down to go through to the semi-finals of the Champions League really is a brilliant night, one to absolutely enjoy.
Yeah, really, really special, wasn't it? Unbelievable performance from the women. Like you said, it's sort of going into it 2 goals down as well. You've got absolutely no room for error.
Yeah.
And to restrict Madrid to basically nothing, which they did all night, apart from a little scare at the end in injury time, obviously. It was just a fabulous, fabulous performance. I thought the first half was good as well, despite the fact it was still 0-0. I thought they set the tone well in the first half. They didn't get the goal, but as soon as Russo scored, so early on in the second half, it was just a case of how quickly are Arsenal going to overturn it. And it was just a really special performance in that second half. Real Madrid are very fortunate that they got away with just a 3-0 defeat. Really, it could have been much, much more. And Russo was electric on the night. The movement, the finishing, so unlucky not to get a hat trick. I still don't quite know how at least one of those didn't count. I mean, they were the tightest of offside calls you can possibly get. And the first one especially was such a good finish. I felt really, really sorry for her that she had the hat trick taken away from her. But I'm sure she doesn't care at all this morning.
No, Tim was saying that they did see a replay of that second one. The second one in particular, to me, when I was watching, I was going, surely she's level. They're going to give her this one. But he said in the press box they got a replay and it did. It did unfortunately show her just offside. I mean, that was the only downside of last night, that she didn't get the hat-trick that she absolutely deserved. I think it's pretty much as complete a centre-forward performance as you would like. The message at halftime must have been, come on, let's go out, get an early goal, really try and undermine Real Madrid within a minute. I mean, I do think it's a great finish as well. I think the 2 finishes that actually counted were great. The second one, really instinctive, I guess you would say, where it just sort of fell and she kept her foot over the ball enough to guide it into the back of the net. But the first one, sort of coming in at the back post, a brave finish, a real centre-forwards finish, and I think she absolutely deserves her plaudits.
Yeah, she does. It was really good. 2 really sharp finishes. Like you said, the second one she easily could have skied that. To keep it down, keep it under the bar was really good. And the first one reminded me a little bit. Do you remember Thomas Vermaelen's sort of injury time winner against Newcastle way back when at the Emirates? Reminded me of that a little bit. Great cross, great finish. Chloe Kelly played a part as well. He's proven to be a decent signing.
She was great,
yeah. And, a couple of really lovely crosses in that second half. So, brilliant from Russo. Fantastic. Like I said, the only downside, she didn't get a hat-trick, but, what a night. And this sort of sets up a hell of a semi-final against Lyon to come. You imagine the first leg is going to be incredible. Shame the second leg's not at the Emirates.
Yeah.
You'd like to have that. But, you go out and put a really strong performance in that first leg and, right on the right on the sort of edge of getting yourself to the final. Hopefully as well, last night sort of bodes well for what's to come in the next few weeks when it comes to Madrid.
Well, fingers crossed. It's one win over Madrid down and one more to go, I guess you would say. We'll come to that. I suppose the Lyon thing is very interesting as well because they're such a powerhouse, if you like, and there is the Arsenal connection as well with Joe Montemurro in charge there. So there's all these dynamics at play. That first leg is at home, and look, I said this on Monday when I was talking to James because I was at the Arsenal-Liverpool game at the weekend. Like, get along. If you can get along, bring the kids, bring the family to a huge game, what's going to be a huge game. And Arsenal, I think, will be looking to sell this out as much as possible because to have a full Emirates Stadium, I think the women's team and the performance they put in last night really, really does merit as much support as Arsenal fans out there can give them and hopefully give them some advantage in that first leg as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was about 23,000 last night, wasn't it? But the noise in there was incredible that they generated.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think they'll sell. I'd be very, very surprised if they don't sell out, or at least get very, very close to selling out. You know, they'll really, really push it. And I'm sure the supporters will turn up for that one. It's going to be a really incredible night against, like you said, an absolute powerhouse of the women's game. And if you want to get into the final, you've got to beat the best. And that's what Arsenal are going to have to do.
Sure.
But, you know, the way they're playing at the moment, certainly since Rene's come on board, and just the way she's turned things around and got them playing. I mean, Russo is a prime example of just the sort of transformation in a player. You know, she's now the sort of striker that we all thought Arsenal were signing when they first got her through the door. And, you know, Lewis-Skelly deserves such a huge praise for the way she's transformed the team and got them playing with freedom. And, you know, the goals they're scoring at home, like I said, the Liverpool game at the weekend, you know, I think there was 6 in a row at home that they scored 4 or more. You know, they're playing with a real freedom now that just wasn't there before. And, you know, when you play, but you score that amount of goals, you've always got a chance of winning. And so, yeah, it's going to be an incredible couple of games against Lyon. All
right. Well, we'll obviously keep our eyes peeled on ticket details, and you'll find all the analysis, as I said, in the Arsenal Women Arsecast, which is out now wherever you get your podcast. Tim and Jamie going over last night's brilliant 3-0 win over Real Madrid. So let's talk a little bit about the Interlull, and it has been, I guess, an interesting one in the sense that some Arsenal players have been involved, some Arsenal players have been in the spotlight a little bit, no more so than Myles Lewis-Skelly. I know a lot has been said about him, but as an Arsenal fan and as an Englishman, how did you view the international break for him? I have to say, you know, from a purely neutral, objective point of view, when the discussion first started about Nwaneri and Lewis-Skelly maybe being called up to the senior England team, I did have a few reservations, you know, because of the age, the sort of load, the physical load that would be put on them. And over the last few weeks, obviously what happened with Lewis-Skelly and some of the disciplinary issues or spotlight that's been on him, I was just a little bit cautious. You know, with no skin in the game, I was just a little bit cautious about him being called up. I will this morning eat a slice of humble pie. I think this has been a great interlull for Myles Lewis-Skelly, not just because of the goal that he scored and the way that he played for England. I think what it has done is sort of pushed all that other stuff to the side, all the noise to the side, all the sort of bad journalism to the side, and highlighted the fact that he is a really, really promising player with huge potential and huge talent who has made it to this level and made it to the England squad on merit, on the basis of his own performances. And that even if some people were maybe skeptical about his inclusion, and I don't mean me, I mean sort of opposition fans who, you know, opposition fans don't miss any opportunity to do a player down, right? And again, I think some of that noise around him is created by them, but I think even they would probably have to admit that what they've seen from him in an England shirt in those 2 games, opposition notwithstanding, has been very, very impressive.
Yeah, it's always impossible not to sort of sit there and admit that. You know, it's fantastic international break with him. I agree with you, by the way. I was a little bit concerned about it. My fear was that just something was going to happen. You know, say, you know, Lewis-Skelly gets in a position where he brings a man down and gets sent off for a professional foul or something like that. It was just like, oh God, that was my overriding fear, is what is the reaction going to be to that? Because all the bullshit, frankly, that came with Lewis-Skelly being called up and the stuff he's been subjected to in the build-up to the game, the reaction to that social media picture that the England account put out of a kid smiling, clearly absolutely delighted to be walking in St George's Park for the first time, and yet somehow that generated the abuse that it did below. It was just nauseating. And my big fear was, as much as I didn't think that would faze him because he's such a strong character, and he is, and he's got such a strong support network and family around him, which I know a lot of people have referenced before. I wasn't worried about it phasing him, but I was just worried about if something happened in a purely football moment, that the reaction was just going to be so brutal. So I was a little bit concerned with my Arsenal hat on.
Sure.
But I'm not at all surprised to see... I'm surprised he scored. I mean, that's just like, dream stuff, isn't it? But I'm not surprised the performances he put in and how at home he looked in those surroundings, because, as I said, the kid's fearless. Nothing phases him. He's got such a strong head on his shoulders and, such a good brain. So I wasn't surprised to see how he played, but, the goal was brilliant. I was watching it. It was my son's birthday weekend, and I was at Chessington World of Adventures, and I was at the hotel on the Friday night. We were eating dinner, and I was watching it on my phone. And when he
Happy
scored,
birthday, son! Happy birthday, son! I'm watching the football.
I know. And when he scored, I shouted out so loud. My wife, who was sitting opposite me, didn't know I was watching the football on my phone. And she was like, what? She thought something had genuinely really bad that had happened. I was like, Myles just scored on his debut. I was so happy for him. I don't think I've celebrated a goal like that for England outside of an international tournament. I was just so happy for him because of all the shit that had gone on in the build-up to the game. It just, I was delighted for him. It was brilliant. And, the celebration, that picture of him with the England flag behind him as well, it was just such a great... Everything was such a great response to all the idiots, the online idiots that had gone on. So, I was absolutely made up for him. That interview he did afterwards with Declan Rice on the pitch, and they were telling him that, only Owen and Rooney have scored at a younger age than you. And you could just see the pride coming out. That's what we would dream about as a kid growing up, wanting to represent our country and scoring on our debut and setting records. And so, delighted for him. Really pleased.
Do you remember, it was a bit earlier in the season, there was a game, it could have been... Was it PSG, the first game he started, or I think it was anyway, his first start in the Champions League, and they did an interview with him and Bukayo Saka on the pitch afterwards, and you could see at that point he'd only really just broken through, and there was this sort of, I don't want to say deference, but like he understood that he was just making his breakthrough, and there standing beside him was Bukayo Saka, who'd done something similar a few years previously, who'd followed the same path. And there was a sort of element of, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but sort of looking up to Bukayo, I think is probably the best way that I can put it. Because why wouldn't you, if you're Myles Lewis-Skelly, look at Bukayo Saka as a kind of an example? And here we are a few months later, and he's standing there confidently beside Declan Rice, who's an established England international, who has taken him and Nwaneri and I think Max Dowman a little bit under his wing, some of the stories that we saw during the international break. But you can almost see a sort of the way he's maturing and believing in himself. I don't mean to say he didn't believe in himself before. I think he very obviously did. But you become more comfortable, don't you? Your initial stages as a young player, there is that uncertainty. But then he very quickly, I think, and Nwaneri, who I'm going to talk to you about now in a second, have really settled in a sort of no frills kind of way.
They have. I think that's kind of what sets some younger players apart from others as well, isn't it? Just how quickly they settle in their surroundings and feel like they belong. It comes down to probably character, personality a little bit, just how sort of easy that sort of thing comes to you. And with some players, it just comes easier than others. Talk about Saka. I remember when I was over in Germany when he made his debut. He scored his first goal in the Champions League. No, Europa League, sorry, against Frankfurt, I think it was. And a few of us from the press pack were all downstairs waiting to speak to him. And Arsenal were like, right, be careful with this kid. He's 17, go easy on him. He came in and was surrounded by all of us. And within about 2 minutes, I was just like, wow, this kid's got it. There's no fear. It was just the way he spoke, everything. It was just something different to what you normally get when you speak to those sort of really young players coming through. And I think Myles has got that about him as well. He just seems like he takes everything in his stride, and he's not really got that sort of inferiority complex around older players. I mean, we saw it with Haaland, for example, at the Etihad when he went up and sort of got involved in that spat. There was no fear there. This was a kid just walking up and getting in Erling Haaland's face, trying to, saying, "What are you doing? Having to go at my teammates and stuff." So I think that that sort of character he has and that personality he has just comes through on the football pitch. Nothing really phases him, and his rise has been so rapid this season. I don't think anyone would have predicted at the start of the season where he would be right now. I don't think even he, in his wildest dreams, would have done. But he is there, and that's all credit to him for the way he's performed on the pitch, and that fearlessness that he does show has just allowed him to progress so quickly. And he's Arsenal's first choice left back now. Out of about 8 million that are at the club at the moment, he's Arsenal's first choice left back, and that's ahead of a £35 million summer signing that come in, and that's purely down to his performances and his work.
Yeah, 100%. And those performances for England, if they're a confidence boost for him, they might be very timely given the Calafiori injury over the international break and, what we need to do in the next few games, particularly as we look ahead to Real Madrid. I mentioned Ethan Nwaneri. He's with the England under-21s. He only turned 18 last week. So he is a little bit above his age group. He has been playing for the England under-19s this season, but he's up to the under-21s. He scored the Ethan Nwaneri goal. Can we call it that now at this point?
I think we can.
You look at him and you go, oh, I know what he's going to do here. Oh, look, he just did it. A brilliant cut inside and a finish into the far corner. I don't know that I've ever seen a young player develop a trademark goal quite as quickly as he did. But what was interesting to me when I looked at it and when I thought about what he's done this season, he's 8 goals for the senior team this season. Across all competitions in his first season as basically a 17-year-old, 18 last week, as we said. He also has another 7 or 8 goals, I think, for England at underage level. Again, you can put those goals in whatever context you want, right? The under-19s, and we all understand the level, the under-21s, etc., etc. But this guy's got an eye for goal, a real eye for goal. And I don't know if you're in the press conference when Mikel Arteta mentioned at some point Ethan Nwaneri becoming a 9, and I was a bit like, I'm not sure I really see that, but Mikel Arteta sees him every day on the training ground. But the more I see him, the more I see the kind of logic to where Arteta is going in that sense. Like, I don't think Ethan Nwaneri in the current climate with the physical profile of players who usually appear at 9 is going to transform himself at some point into like a classic out-and-out number 9 centre forward. I think what Arteta was talking about more than anything was how important it will be to get the best out of this guy is to get him into those goal-scoring positions as often as possible. And you could say someone like Mo Salah is a great example of a player who can be really, really prolific, Bukayo Saka too, playing on the right of a front 3. So you're more of a forward than a centre forward. I was really curious as to, how we're going to see Nwaneri develop over the coming seasons at Arsenal, in that, is he going to be part of the front 3? There is that Saka Nwaneri thing on the right-hand side. Does it open up for him on the left-hand side? Or is there maybe some thought to be given to the idea, rather, that maybe Ethan Nwaneri, a little bit further back, but with license to get into those goal-scoring positions, brings a different kind of dynamic to this Arsenal team?
Yeah, I mean, like there is something looming on the horizon for Arteta to have to deal with, I think, because of the, talk about the rise of Lewis-Skelly, the rise of Nwaneri, like you said. When you're a team that doesn't have many real out-and-out goal threats, you kind of need the ones you have on the pitch for a lot of the time. And once Saka's back, how does that work with Ethan Nwaneri? Because you would just think, Saka obviously is going to be starting games. So what happens to Ethan then? And so there is, you've got to find a way at some point of getting these players on the pitch at the same time. I don't think it's you've got to rush it right now. He has just turned 18. It feels wrong to actually call him 18. I'm so used to calling him 16 or 17. It's like, wow, he's suddenly 18 now.
He is. He can drink now. He can have a beer if he wants.
He can get changed in the changing room with his teammates.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah. So there is something he's going to have to work out at some point, how he's going to get all of them on the pitch at the same time, because Odegaard as well was kind of in that similar position to Nwaneri. He played as a forward for the 21s, didn't he, when he scored that goal? I think him and Amari Hutchinson were kind of playing as a forward line. I think Amari might have been a little bit further ahead than Ethan. But it's going to be interesting to see how he does it, Arteta. It really, really is. I don't think right now I think he's too early for him to sort of progress into that sort of 9 position that Arteta's talked about. Even since Arteta first mentioned that in that press conference, when he's been asked about it again, he's always sort of rode back from it a little bit and been like, well, there's no rush. Maybe I see that, but not quite yet. He's got to learn and develop. And, if you're playing him as a 9 and suddenly he's got his back to goal all the time, you're taking an awful lot away from Ethan Nwaneri, I think, because he's so dangerous when he's driving towards goal. And it's like when he's got that goal in his eyesight, he's just so determined to get there as quickly as possible and get his shot away. And if he's having his back to goal an awful lot, I think you take a fair bit out of his game. So it's going to be an interesting one for Arteta, certainly next season, I think, to try and work out. Look, it's a great position to be in. How long we sat here and said, we need cover a competition, whatever you want to call it, for Bukayo Saka. We're going to have to spend 50, 60 million to try and do that. But now suddenly we don't have to worry about that anymore, because we've got our own player who's come through the ranks who is absolutely perfect for that role. And so it's about sharing the minutes, doing it enough to get both players on the pitch, as much as possible. Pete, I know people are going to be saying, what about Martin Odegaard? Can you move Odegaard over and play left 8? Can Nwaneri play left 8? Can Nwaneri play on the left hand side of the attack? It's something Arteta's going to have to deal with. I really don't know the answer at the moment.
No, me neither. But that's my sort of thinking, is that at some point, maybe it's a little bit too early, and I do think there is an element of, particularly when you're operating higher up the pitch, you need to mature a little bit. You need to understand the dynamics of the game a little bit. But I do think when I try and picture an Arsenal team with Saka and Nwaneri, Odegaard, maybe even a centre forward, who knows, coming next season. Yeah, who knows what will happen on the left-hand side. If Trossard goes this summer, there might be space there. I'm really fascinated to see. It sort of might go a little bit against Arteta's instincts as well. That's what's makes it really fascinating for me, is that we know what he likes at left 8, and it is a particular physical profile of player. Will he have to go against that? Will the talent or the sort of need to get all these guys in the team force his hand a little bit? That's what's interesting to me.
Do you think if he's out of the two of them, Odegaard and Nwaneri, if you're going to move one of those to a left 8 position in some games, it feels more like Odegaard to me would be better in that role than Ethan. Do you agree? When you talk about the trademark Ethan Nwaneri goal, if he's not in that position to be able to do that, you're
that's
taking
true,
an awful lot out of the game.
Yeah. That is true. So you want him operating more in those sort of inside, outside, right channels? Potentially, yeah.
And I think I look at Odegaard and I think he could probably do... I think he'd be more comfortable in that role than maybe Ethan would, certainly initially anyway.
Yeah, I think you're probably right there. Mentioning Odegaard, he had a very interesting display for Norway. 3 assists against Israel in a 4-2 win for Norway. I mean, that's kind of what you'd like to see from him. I was worried about him. Actually, I was worried about we're going to get another one of those injuries on international duty. But, I think by his own admission, it hasn't been his best season. He hasn't found his best form. So if things like this can help a little bit going into the final part of the season, then we have to, try and take the positives, I guess.
Yeah, and a couple of assists were lovely as well. The one for Haaland was nice. The first one was really, really good as well. The sort of the initial touch, the spin, the pass was really good. Look, I think Odegaard's got a lot of unfair flack this season. I know he's not been at his best, but I think there are definitely, you've got to put it into context. I think, and I hate when you try and sort of put context onto things. People say you're using excuses. It's not an excuse. It's just reasons. It's looking at reasons why perhaps he's not been at his best. And like you said, he admits he's not been at his best, but there's definitely reasons for that. The injury was a big injury. He's never really suffered one like that in his career. He'd come back from it. I still think he came back pretty early from that and was thrown straight into 90 minutes after 90 minutes once he did.
Yeah.
The right-hand side, when you're so used to those players being decimated and not having them around, you've got to get used to other players. And again, it's not excuses. It's just reasons why I think we've not quite seen the Odegaard of old. And I think mainly as well, the main difference between Odegaard this season and the last 2 seasons is more not so much the creativity or that, it's just the goals. He's just not been scoring the amount of goals. And when you look at the shots he's had this season, he has got into positions to easily be sitting in now with 10, 12 goals to his name. But he's just not been finishing as well as he has been before. So he's got to work on that. But I'm really excited about Odegaard next season. I have to say, I would not be at all surprised if we see a real top performance from Odegaard throughout next season. You know, some of the stuff I see online of strip him of the captaincy. We should sell if a bid comes in. It's like, this is Arsenal. He's won Player of the Year for the last 2 seasons. Everyone is allowed to have a little bit of a drop off. I just think football now, it's so reactionary. If you have a 3 or 4 bad months, suddenly it's like, sure, he's done. It's like, he's not done at all. He's just not had the best of seasons. It happens.
I agree completely.
To the best of them. And Martin Odegaard is still one of Arsenal's best players. And I would not be at all surprised if we see him have a proper good season next season. Yeah,
well, I hope he has a proper good end to this season as well.
He's still got the chance to.
Exactly.
You've got the biggest of games coming up against a club that you left to come to Arsenal. You know, if you ever go into a match with a bit of a point to prove, he's going to have one against Real Madrid. And, there's going to be space against Madrid. There's going to be a lot of pitch to run into and to create. And who's to say he's not going to have an absolute 2 blinding games there and help Arsenal get through?
I hope so. I think, creative players also rely quite heavily on movement ahead of them, which, maybe has been missing at times. And again, this is not an excuse. These are reasons. And just back to your point about how reactionary things have got, even some of our best players, the best players in Arsenal's history, have gone through funks in their own form and their own productivity, and they're still regarded as some of the best players that this club has ever seen. You have to give people license or leeway for fluctuations in form. Do we all want more? Do we all try and find solutions for that? Absolutely. But the lack of patience for a player who's given this team and helped this team to become what it is and has been for the last couple of years, I have to say I found it a bit a bit over the top, I think, is what you said. And also the fact that there's just too heavy a burden on him at times. There isn't really anybody else to do that job or pull those strings in this team when, let's say, if he's having a bad game, we haven't really had the player or players to come in and take some of that burden off him or just be an alternative. So,
No, he's not been helped by the squad building.
No, exactly.
Absolutely not been helped. And he's not been helped by the fact he's not got a striker ahead of him who's... you stick Erling Haaland ahead of him making runs for Norway, and Martin Odegaard will find him and create chances for him. And for certainly of late, as good a job as Mourinho is doing, and fair play to him for the job he is doing. If you're Martin Odegaard, you're not looking up and seeing Mourinho sort of making the runs and charging into space and peeling off the back of the last man and everything like that. So you've got very, very little to work with there. And you're constantly coming up against teams in low block. It's not easy. Again, it's not excuses, and we do want more and need more from Martin Odegaard than we've seen this season. But there's a few problems at Arsenal right now, and I don't have Martin Odegaard anywhere near the top of the list of problems that we've got. I would agree with that. Looking ahead to Fulham, and stories are beginning to emerge, and I know this is something that you spoke about. I saw it aggregated by somebody, but Bukayo Saka could be back in the squad for the game against Fulham, which is great news. To what extent do you think Arsenal are going to really manage his return physically? Because I think we saw and have seen with Ben White since his return, he's been brought back into the squad. He's played some minutes here or there. The one game he started and did like 80 odd minutes in, he found it tough, and that's completely normal to find it tough when you've been sidelined for 3 months or whatever after surgery. Bukayo Saka is coming back from a similar situation, different kind of surgery, but the same kind of layoff. The match fitness, the match sharpness, those things really do take time to build. So to what extent do you think Arsenal are going to sort of have a plan for Saka's integration and reintegration? Like, it can't be like straight away. It's got to be sort of gradual, doesn't it?
in my mind, with my cautious hat on, which I have from time to time, I'm looking at like the second leg in Madrid as the one where maybe you've built up Saka enough for him to start in that game. I know that a lot of eyes will be on the home game against Real Madrid. It comes first, and there are games against Fulham, games against Everton in which you can give him minutes, but I really think it'd be too soon to start him in a game of that intensity at home. I think, if you're looking for a moment in the second half, you're looking for a player to introduce to give the team something, in a tight game, that's your 30 minutes of Bukayo Saka right there. But, I think it'd be too soon otherwise. How are you thinking about it, or how are you feeling about it?
I'm kind of feeling like you are feeling about it. I think they've managed it very carefully already. I think at a push, he could potentially have come back before the international break. He was very, very close. But the plan was always really sort of step things up during this break so that when everyone comes back and full training starts again, hopefully Saka can join in with that. And as far as I'm aware, that's been the case. He feels like he's ready. Definitely, if all things go to plan between now and whenever the squad is selected on Monday, Tuesday morning, whenever it is, there is genuine hope that he is going to be in that squad and that he could get some minutes. I think he thinks he could start against Fulham, by all accounts. I certainly don't think that will happen. I agree. I think the second leg feels like the most realistic time to start. Maybe get 20 minutes against Everton. 20 minutes against Fulham, 30 minutes against Everton. Is the first leg too early for a start? You would think potentially yes. If it was any other player than Bukayo Saka, I would definitely rule it out. But it's Bukayo Saka. It's Real Madrid. It's Arsenal's season on the line here. I think I was interested. I was listening to you and Elliot talk about this the other day on your show, and Elliot was like, "Well, look, if the medical staff think he's ready, then he's ready. He can play 60 minutes against Real Madrid." And I kind of knowing Arteta the way he operates, I would not be shocked if Saka starts that first leg. But they do have to be cautious of it, and they won't take any risks. Absolutely. So I think probably, maybe build up the minutes, and then you really start him in the second leg at the Bernabeu. But I mean, I can't wait on Tuesday night if he does make the squad. The noise inside that stadium when he goes and warms up for the first time, when he comes on, it's going to be very, very special. We've missed him so much. It was on my birthday that he got injured. I was in Lapland. I was in Lapland just before Christmas, December 21st.
I was with the family. I was on Santa's sleigh. I was watching football on my phone, and then it was like, oh, fuck, Saka's injured.
I was on the coach on the way to, I don't know, Santa's workshop or something on like the reindeer ride, one of the activities I was on with my kids. And one of the dads next to me was an Arsenal fan as well. And I was scrolling through my phone on the coach, and I was just like, oh, shit. The worst thing has happened. Saka's injured, and it looks like a long-termer. And we were both sitting there on the coach, and we're like, that's it. Season's done.
Christmas is cancelled, children.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going home. Sod the Northern Lights, sod Santa, we're going home. I'm not in the mood anymore. And it was, but we both just looked at each other and it was like, well, that's it. Realistically, we're not going to, that was our season done at that point. It generally felt like that. And I think, other things have happened as well, of course. But I still think the moment that Saka did his hamstring in that game against Crystal Palace, I think realistically Arsenal's chances of the title were gone. Yeah. But to see him back now, and for there still to be something in the season, yes, it's not the Premier League, that's done obviously, but there is still a chance. And Real Madrid of all teams, could we get that magic moment? That Henry against Leeds coming back, and Henry against Leeds type moment, something like that.
Henry against Real Madrid.
Yeah, Henry against Real Madrid, exactly. You just wouldn't rule it out because it's Bukayo Saka, and he can produce that sort of moment. And maybe Arteta will be thinking that in the first leg, thinking, oh, can I get 60 minutes out of him? Yeah. Can I just get him on the pitch for a little bit longer? But we'll see. Yeah, they definitely have to be cautious.
I do have this sort of weird thing in my mind where it's hard not to look back at the Saka injury after the Odegaard injury as the thing that sort of cracked our foundations a little bit too far for us to cope with. And then you have the Jesus injury, the Havertz injury, the Martinelli injury, which is a little bit more temporary, obviously, because he's back now. But that Saka moment where I can remember just so many people going, well, that's it, season over. Season over, we're fucked. And I think that turned out to be true to an extent, because it's take the best player out of any team and they're going to find it difficult. As people have often said, take Mo Salah out of Liverpool this season and where are they going to be? But
it's not just the best player either, is it? It was the guy who produced the moments, the goals, the assists. It was Bukayo Saka. If he wasn't scoring them, he was setting them up. And when you've got a player who's that sort of percentage-wise is that important to what you do and how you score goals and how you win games, and you take him out of your team for 4 months, it's just very hard to recover from. The Salah comparison is absolutely the right one. I know Salah scored more and set up more. It was a sort of once-in-a-lifetime season he's had. But, in December, if Saka stays fit, doesn't get injured, and Salah gets injured for 4 months, the league table would look very, very different now. I'm absolutely convinced of it.
100%.
Again, it's not an excuse. It's just context to a season that's been a struggle for Arsenal.
Yeah. But there's this thing in my mind that, sort of pretty much everything has gone wrong for Arsenal. As much as could go wrong for Arsenal has gone wrong for Arsenal. I'm just hoping that sort of Saka's return turns the universe the other way around. You know what I mean? That maybe along the way, between now and the end of May, we might get a thing or two that goes our way rather than having to cope with another thing, whether it's a sending off or an injury or a crazy refereeing decision or whatever it might be. That maybe, having endured all that, Saka's return, sparks something in that regard. So we'll keep fingers crossed for that. I have a few questions here from our Discord just to sort of flesh things out a little bit. But Chargui is asking about the Real Madrid games and how we approach those. I think that's kind of a conversation for a different day. We've got to get a bit closer to those games. But I did want to ask you about how you think Arteta is going to use or view the Fulham and Everton games in the context of what we've got coming up against Real Madrid. They're important games in their own right. They're Premier League games. We want the points. We need the points. And I think he's very, or has been very clear about how he compartmentalizes games. It's the next game that's important. That's the only thing we're focusing on. And that's obviously a public message which, makes a lot of sense. But behind the scenes, there's got to be some thinking going on. And they must realize that if there is to be any tangible success from this season, it is going to come from the Champions League. That's the only trophy that I think we can win at this point, beyond something ridiculous happening in the Premier League, which I just don't see. I don't think anybody can see. So do you think there will be some thinking between Mikel Arteta and his coaching staff about how to approach those two games in terms of sharing the workload, getting some players back to match fitness, as we've said about Saka, but Ben White is another one. There have been a couple of other players who might need those things. Do the Real Madrid games loom that large that they're going to really influence the way he approaches those games?
I think they probably will, but not. I mean, when you expect Mikel Arteta to rotate and go sort of weaker than you normally would, you turn up and he's got full strength team out. So it's Mikel Arteta we're talking about. So you would have to kind of be careful. But I think it's impossible not to be thinking. I'm sure in his head right now he knows his starting 11 for Madrid if everyone's fit, and so he'll be thinking of that starting 11, thinking, right, how do I best manage that? Make sure that 11 is ready to go when we play Madrid after these two games. I think. Tim, I think the Real Madrid team. I mean, look, we're going a bit further ahead now. But if you sat here right now and said your Real Madrid team, I think the only question mark is Saka, isn't it, for that first leg? Who plays on the right hand side? If everyone's fit, it's going to be Timber. I think right back, it's going to be Saliba, Gabriel, Lewis-Skelly, Partey, Rice, Odegaard, maybe Saka, and then it will be Marino and Martinelli or Trossard on the left hand side. So how do you make sure that team is in the best possible shape for that game? Can you play Ben White? Certainly against Everton from the start. So again, a lot depends on if Timber's well enough. We don't know how ill he was to come back from the international duty. And, if there's any sort of illness there, you don't want him coming back to the training ground too early because you don't want to be in that situation again that we had a few months ago. Obviously, the Calafiori injury has hurt a little bit in terms of making sure Lewis-Skelly's in perfect condition for the Madrid game, because I don't think we'll see Calafiori before maybe the first leg. So
Tierney against Everton is
Absolutely, yeah. Or Zinchenko as well. So there are options there. I think the fullbacks are going to be the areas where he's going to really try and manage before Madrid. I think that those two are so important. Making sure, Timber against Vinny Jr. is going to be just one of the key matchups over the 2 legs. So how do you make sure Timber's ready for that? So I think that will be managed over the next couple of games. Left back will be managed. Maybe we might see Partey given a rest against Everton. Jorginho comes in for that game. But other than that, I think he'll still go relatively strong. The rest of them will play in the next 2 games because you do need point. Second is not a done deal yet. If these 2 games go wrong, Arsenal, it's been feels like about 5 years since Arsenal beaten Fulham. It's not been quite that long, but we've not had great results against Fulham of late.
We owe them one.
We absolutely owe them, and they're a decent side. Fulham. They're going to come to the Emirates. It's going to be a bit of a free hit for them because of the position they're in this season. They're going to really go for it as they always do. I think they're a really good team under Marco Silva, so that's going to be tough. I think Everton are one of the informed teams in the Premier League since Moyes has arrived, and they're on the countdown at Goodison, so every game's important to them at their place. So they're 2 really difficult games, and if they go wrong for Arsenal, then suddenly you're right back in the mix again of top 4, top 5 situation. So you can't just throw these games away. So it's a bit of a balancing act that he'll play. But I think mainly fullbacks will be the option, will be the things we might see him sort of chop and change a little bit to make sure they're ready to go for Madrid.
All right, sort of in the same ballpark. Well, we're talking about Madrid again, and Ben Nugent asks, how would you feel if the rumours about Zubimendi being off to Madrid were true? He said, personally, I'm not entirely sure about him, but having an important signing wrapped up early in the window would be useful to allow the focus to be fully on signing attacking options or backup goalkeepers and defenders. And there's stories emerging from Spain this week that Zubimendi is of interest to Real Madrid, and he is more inclined to go there than to go to Arsenal. But, you take transfer news with a pinch of salt, particularly during an international break.
Yeah, I wouldn't be devastated if Arsenal don't get Martin Zubimendi. I'm of the opinion at the moment Arsenal's priority kind of needs to, and I know Jorginho and Partey are going to go, but I still feel like Arsenal need to really prioritise the final third when it comes to their summer signings. Striker needs to be bought. If you're asking me who would I rather sign, and as number 6 like Zubimendi or a more attacking potential number 8 option for me this summer, I personally would go with the latter. I think, right? Declan Rice, I think, can comfortably play number 6. I know a lot of people sort of question that, but he signed as a number 6, and I see no reason why he can't be Arsenal's number 6 next season. And maybe you can have another option up top. So I wouldn't be distraught if Zubimendi goes to Real Madrid. I'd be happy if he signed because he's a top player, but it's not. It wouldn't be at the top of my priority list a new number 6, even with Partey and Jorginho going. I have to say. I mean, I suppose when you look at it though, if those 2 do go and you are just left with Rice, basically, there is need for someone else. Yeah. I wouldn't be distraught if he goes to Real Madrid. What about you?
I'm the same. I like him. I think he's a good player. I was slightly underwhelmed by him in the games against Manchester United in the Europa League. So that, look, you could have had an off night or an off week or whatever it is when we've talked about form a bit earlier. I have been impressed by him at times when I've watched Real Sociedad. If he comes in, Partey and Jorginho go, you bring in Zubimendi, you've got Rice and Zubimendi as your 2 potential 6s.
Yeah.
I think that's probably pretty decent. I don't think he is the be-all and end-all, though, when it comes to midfield signings this season. So... yeah, I mean, it's a thing for Arsenal to sort out. It's a thing for the new sporting director to sort out, isn't it? As and when he gets announced. I wouldn't be averse to his signing at all, particularly with those 2 going, but I wouldn't cry too heavily if he went somewhere else.
No. I just think. The left eight's an interesting one. If Arsenal do sign Zubimendi and they get the striker that I think we all bloody hope they sign, it's like Kai Havertz. And are we going to see Kai Havertz move back into that sort of left 8 contention, sort of sharing with Declan Rice? Because, Mikel loves Kai Havertz. He's going to want Kai Havertz on the pitch a lot of the time. Not all of the time, but a lot of the time. So where does he play? Is he going to be just coming on or sharing with whoever, the striker who comes in? Or is he going to drop back and have another go, sort of trying to make that left 8 position his own? And then if he does that, what happens to Declan Rice if Zubimendi's been signed? So I think there's lots of interesting sort of bits and pieces that needs to be sorted out in the summer when it comes to adding to that midfield.
4-4-2, 2 big men up top. Come on. It's the next evolution. The next evolution is whatever the opposite of evolution is. We're going back to the way football used to be. What about this one? We mentioned Fulham. Dylan says, what do we do with Reiss Nelson next year? Do Fulham want to sign him, even with the injuries, or do we keep him and use him for like 5 minutes here or there? He's a player, I think, one of many this summer over whom there is a question mark about the future. He's been quite unfortunate, I think, with the injury. The same kind of injury Bukayo Saka had, a hamstring which required surgery. He was doing quite well at Fulham, it's fair to say. He played his way into the first team, played his way into the starting 11, was producing a little bit as well, some goals and assists, and then he got that injury. It has been kind of a feature of his career, though, hasn't it? That every little step forward he takes, there tends to be one or two back.
Yeah, that was a shame, wasn't it? Because he was doing well at Fulham. He was pretty popular there. I've got a couple of Fulham mates, and they liked him. And I think Marco Silva liked him as well. And, he said some nice stuff about him when he did get the injury, Marco Silva. So what happens with him in the summer? I think he goes. I mean, the emergence of Ethan Nwaneri is going to make it even more difficult for Reiss Nelson to get any minutes for that final season. He's out of contract at the end of next season anyway. So I think Arsenal will certainly try and get a deal done for him. It's not going to be easy when he's missed the second half of the season. I bet everyone at Arsenal was like, when he got that injury. Yeah. Obviously you feel bad for Reiss Nelson, but also when you sort of look ahead to the summer and the plans to potentially move him on, they would have hoped he had a really strong season, and he was having one. He was having a good season anyway, which was going to make it, you'd think they could have got 10, 15 million pounds for him come the summer. Now that's looking difficult, I would imagine, but I think they'll certainly put all efforts in, and Reiss Nelson and his people will put all efforts into finding a sort of permanent solution in the summer for him.
Peter Hust asks, was it a mistake to let Micah Bierith go? 11 goals in 9 games for Monaco suggests he could have been useful, but maybe it's just my Danish bias.
Was it a mistake? No, I don't think so. It's all hindsight, isn't it? He wasn't going to play. He made it pretty clear he wasn't going to sign a new contract. He only had a year left on his contracts. He wanted to be first choice striker somewhere, so he wasn't going to sign a new one. So, what do you do in that situation? He kind of had to sell, and maybe it was a mistake to only get 4 million for him, but who know? Do you really know he was going to go and sort of explode the way he did? They got a nice little sell on for him. So when he made the move to Monaco relatively quickly from Austria, they got some decent money for him. So no, I don't really think it was a mistake. I'm happy he's doing well for Monaco, but Arsenal are in a position where they kind of had to sell, really.
Yeah, it's one of those where I think if, we keep players fit this season, nobody's talking about it. No. There might be an element of like, oh, well, look what you let go. But, look at what Flo Balogun did on his first loan season in France. He absolutely tore it up. And everyone was saying, we got to keep him, we got to keep him, we got to keep him. We got, 30 million, so it was a good deal. But nobody's really talking about Flo Balogun anymore in that context. And I think, obviously, the injuries that we had, it would have been like, well, that would have been a very useful guy to have in reserve. But ultimately, he would have been, 4th, 5th choice striker, in the pecking order. And, usually you don't get to go that far down, which is just, I guess, an indication of how our season went. Let's do this one just to sort of finish it off. Zach Tays, this is not Arsenal related, but it is a big story in the Premier League. It's one of the big stories of this week. And he says, what are your thoughts on the Trent Alexander-Arnold situation and the Liverpool fans' reaction to it? There's been quite an outpouring of anger from Liverpool fans towards Trent Alexander-Arnold after reports that he has reached a pre-contract agreement with Real Madrid, as he is perfectly entitled to do, given he's into the last 6 months of his contract. Homegrown boy, bit of a hero, but now he's the villain among Liverpool fans. How do you view situations like this? Because it is one we've experienced ourselves, as Arsenal fans, and your attachment to a player versus your understanding that for them football is a job and these opportunities come up and he's leaving for free, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a leaving for free thing, isn't it? That's sort of annoyed Liverpool fans the most. I've been talking about this a lot on my channel this week, and people have been sort of disagreeing with me in the comments and stuff like that about it. We've had quite a good debate throughout the week on it. That I think it's easy, isn't it? When it's not one of your players, it's easy to have a view on it. If it's your player and your club, you feel very, very different.
Sure.
But, Trent, does he owe Liverpool anything? I don't think he does. He's come through the ranks, so he didn't cost him any sort of transfer fee. Yes, he's been paid handsomely while he's been there, but he's paid all that money back with his performances on the pitch and the trophies he's helped the club win. He's won it all at Liverpool. He's basically completed it, hasn't he, at Liverpool. He's won the Champions League. He's going to have won the Premier League twice come the end of this season. He's won all the cups. He's scored all those goals, set up all those goals. He's well into his 20s now, and he's got the chance to move to Real Madrid. I mean, how often does that come about? So I can absolutely understand why he's gone. And I don't think he will see, we will see or hear the sort of online abuse when he gets into the stadiums, certainly at Anfield. I think it'll probably be a very, very different reaction to him at Anfield than what we've seen online. I think the sort of match-going fan at Liverpool at Anfield, I think they all understand it will hurt. It will no doubt hurt. But I think they'll give him a much better sort of send-off than what he's getting online. I think it's a bit of a cautionary tale for Arsenal. This is what Real Madrid do. They get into players' ears when their contracts are running down and they're saying, look, don't sign. We will wait. We will sign you. We'll give you lovely wages, a big signing on fee. Just do not sign that contract.
Yeah.
And we know what Arsenal have got coming up over the next couple of years with certainly one player in particular who, Madrid we're already hearing noises about. So it is a bit of a cautionary tale for Arsenal, a bit of a warning in terms of how they operate. And it would hurt if it was an Arsenal player. I mean, what are the players that left that hurt you the most? I think for me, Van Persie was a real kick in the teeth for me. Cesc was, I was distraught with Cesc at the time. But it was kind of the way they went about it and the way those deals sort of happened. I don't really see that with Trent. I think Trent's carried on playing. He stayed quiet. I feel like he's gone about it in the best possible way because it was always going to be difficult because of who he was, wasn't it? It's like there is no easy way to do this, is there? But I think he's gone about it fine.
I agree with you. I know it's easier to talk about it when it is not one of your players. And I guess, the one side is like, well, he's run down his contract so he can leave on a free and he's cost the club a load of money because of that. But the flip side of that is that Real Madrid are not going to pay the transfer fee for him. Exactly. This is the way Real Madrid are going to operate. His opportunity to go to Real Madrid was to do what he has done. And all really he has done is fulfilled the contract that Liverpool gave him. And he's played every week and he's, been fit for the most part. And, is he the greatest right back in the world? Absolutely not. Is he a brilliant defender? No. Does he have some extraordinary ability in terms of his passing range, in terms of free kicks, in terms of his delivery from wide areas, in terms of his ability to operate higher up the pitch than you would normally see a right back operate? 100%. You can see why Real Madrid would have been absolutely keen to do that. I just think it's the way of the world as well at the moment that, any perceived slight, there are, how do you put this? I think we, let's use the two of us as an example, would always try and find a balanced way to talk about things that happen at Arsenal, right? You can see it from one side, you can see it from the other side, we can make a decision or we can have an opinion on it. I think there is a sort of a culture now online and in certain content creators where the greater the frenzy they whip up, the better it is for them. And I think that kind of skews a lot of the discourse around situations like this, when if you step back and try and look at it objectively, would it be better for Liverpool if they got 50, 60 million for Trent Alexander-Arnold? Absolutely. Would Liverpool fans be like, oh, thank you, Trent. Thank you for the 50, 60 million. There'd still be a load of them out there going, fucking, he's leaving, Judas this, whatever. Like, you can't win.
No, you can't win. And again, like you said, they weren't going to get 50, 60 million for him because Real Madrid weren't going to pay 50, 60 million for him. And so what do you do? And that's why I talk about the Saliba. The Saliba one is just that worrying nag at the back of my head that is just there because you just kind of can see this happening. Because who do you, if say Saliba this summer when Arsenal really sort of step up contract talks with him and try and get this done, if the noises come back that of like, yeah, we're in no rush, we'll see what happens, that sort of thing happens, which you probably imagine is going to be the initial response. what do you do in that situation? Because you know Real Madrid are lurking in the background. You know what they're going to be saying to him behind the scenes and to his people behind the scenes.
Sure.
And how do you, if you say, okay, fine, we're going to sell you, how do you sell him? Because if he only wants to go to Real Madrid, you can't force him out, can you? You can't just, you could accept a bid from someone else, but I'm not sure anyone else could afford him at the time. So it's a really difficult situation. And so you've got to look at the whole sort of bigger picture when it comes to these sort of deals. So you can sit there as a Liverpool fan and say, oh, we should have got money for him. But how are you going to get money for Trent if this was happening in the background? It was going to be very, very difficult. So as much as it hurts, you've got to kind of look at it that way as well, I think. And yeah, the Saliba thing is a big, big worry.
Yeah, me too. But I don't want to end this conversation on a down note like that. Right. We've still got a couple of years to, well, at least 12 months. He's going to knock him out at the Bernabeu in a few weeks anyway, with a towering header in the last minute. Okay.
Or kissing the Arsenal badge and pulling up his shirt with like 2031 written on it.
5 more years.
Yeah.
Well, look, I'll hold you to that, Charles. Fingers crossed you're on the button there. As ever, great to talk to you, and thanks a million.
Cheers, Andrew.
Thank you very much indeed to Charles. You can find him on Blue Sky. He is at charleswatts.bsky.social, and you can find him on his own YouTube channel, pumping out the Arsenal content for you. You'll find that at youtube.com at Charles Watts AFC News. And if you can't remember that, there is a link to Charles's YouTube channel in the show notes. So that is just about that for this week's Arsecast. It's a quiet weekend, of course, because we're not in FA Cup action, but we will be in action early next week when we take on Fulham at the Emirates on April 1st. James and I will have an Arsecast Extra for you on Monday, as usual. We'll also have a preview podcast for you on Patreon. We do that for all our Premier League and Champions League games and some of the Cup games as well. And if you're looking for something else to listen to over a quiet weekend, James and I have a new episode of Waffle available on Patreon right now too. That is the podcast in which we take questions and talk about anything and everything except for Arsenal. So it's sort of like one of the Interlull Arsecast Extras, but on PCP. So if you fancy a bit of that, you fancy a preview podcast, and if you fancy supporting everything that we do on Arseblog for just $6 a month, you get access to all of our content at patreon.com/Arseblog. For now, though, thank you so much as always for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye.